80 years ago, the Trolley Series, the Streetcar Series, or the St. Louis Showdown happened in St. Louis. We're going to find out more about it on St. Louis in Tune. Welcome to St. Louis in Tune, and thank you for joining us for fresh perspectives on issues and events with experts, community leaders, and everyday people who are driving change and making an impact that shapes our society and world. I'm Arnold Stricker, along with co-host Mark Langston. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Arnold.
It's good to see you.
And you too. You too.
And
I'm wearing my Cardinals shirt.
I saw that.
It's a real fancy polo shirt. It has leaves and things in the imprint. It's amazing the different kind of shirts you can get from the Cardinals.
Yeah, I like that imprint of the Cardinal. That's that old Cardinal.
It is the old Cardinal on the bat, and I'm doing it just because of our guest today.
Yeah,
we have a very special guest.
We do have a special guest, and he's dressed up in some Cardinal regalia also.
Regalia.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk to him in a minute. But first, and this goes along with some of the heat that we've been enduring, and it actually goes along with our show today. Our return to civility is wear clean clothes and deodorant, especially when you're going to be in a crowded place.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that smelling someone else's body odor is a choice, not an obligation.
Okay.
So it's been very hot recently. Everybody always needs to freshen up, and especially when you go to a baseball game, and especially 80 years ago, when there really wasn't air conditioning and people, they would really dress up. They would wear suits and hats.
Wool suits.
Yes. So we're going to do this right now.
And here we are at the 41st World Series, the first that has ever been an all St. Louis series. St. Louis is streaming into Sportsman's Park today to see the prodigal Browns and the repeating National League champion Cardinals match wits, bats, and brawn for the championship of the world.
There it is, the championship of the world in 1944.
Yeah, not just the United States, but the world.
The world. And our guest today, Ed Wheatley, he's author and film producer, sports historian, president of the St. Louis Browns Historical Society and Fan Club, and the St. Louis in Tune official sports historian and authority. Ed, welcome to St. Louis in Tune
again. There's always so much to talk about sports in St. Louis.
Yes, it is. And we wanted to talk about the 80th anniversary of the Streetcar Series or the Trolley Series or the St. Louis Showdown.
I call it the pinnacle of baseball in St. Louis. You think about that. You have both the city's teams playing in the World Series. That is very rare. And the thing that makes it even more rare is they played in the same stadium. It only happened two other instances between the Giants and the Yankees in 21 and 22, right after the Yankees had moved and before Yankee Stadium would be built in 23 and opened, they played each other in the World Series. The next iteration is 1944, Sportsman's Park, Browns and Cardinals. Now, some people like to throw the Oakland Dodgers Earthquake Series. They played a game or two, the rest out when the one stadium was up. But no, all games were played at Sportsman's Park.
And quickly, some people may not be familiar with the Browns.
We hope so. We've had a reckoning coming about across the country, and they've really picked up popularity. We still have over 700 active people in our St. Louis Browns fan club. We should have 300 to 400 people in September at our annual reunion luncheon at the Missouri Athletic Club. Mike Veck, Bill Veck's son, who owned the Browns, is coming in, and he's one of the best speakers on baseball. One of the best. He's just like his dad is crazy. P.T. Barnum of baseball was his dad's nickname. And Mike Veck, Disco Demolition Night at Comiskey Park. They blew up the records. And I even got Dave Phillips, the chief umpire that day, who forfeited the game against the White Sox because they ruined the field between games of the doubleheader. But it's exciting. The two films were Emmy nominated and wins. And, the book, it's just people loved the Browns, and they don't forget them. And the thing that's even more special is what we have here, because we're in the best baseball town in America. There is nothing like ours, an active fan club. We have events next month, or later, in 2 weeks actually. We'll have Browns Night at the Grizzlies over at their stadium, and we'll be honoring Ned Garver, who won 20 games on a team that lost 100 in 154 seasons. So,
wow.
Yeah, if you wanted to see a good game that year, you always see if Ned was pitching. But no, there's a good, strong fan base. And Cardinals are right there side by side with us, keeping it all alive.
When is the game, the Browns?
August 15th.
August 15th, all right. I want to make a note of that.
And the luncheon is September 24th.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I have my tickets.
Yes, you do.
Mark, you need to get your tickets.
I will.
So we can head down there together.
Actually, I've been going the last couple of years, and it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we dress the home team on, I pick a year of a player we're honoring and giving the bobblehead, so they'll wear retro uniforms of that year. And then we dress the visitors, usually in the Washington Senators.
And it's amazing the people you get to come and speak at these luncheons.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing.
We've had some of the best in baseball.
Yeah. I'm just amazed. And I sat in the very back last time, and I want to tell you, even sitting if you get a bad seat or you think you have a bad seat, there's not a bad seat in the house.
Not in the MAC, and you're in this iconic ballroom and talking baseball with some of the best in baseball. I mean, even Bob Costas popped in last year and said, hey, hopefully, if it all works out, he'll be there. But last year was Rick Dempsey.
Yes.
One of the biggest funny men in baseball still. Right. MVP of 83 World Series. But you remember the iconic rain delay when he pretended he was Babe Ruth and put all the towels in his belly and pointed the home run, the called shot, and then did the annex around. And like I said, Vec is it's important, and it's St. Louis baseball, the best in America.
There's a lot of visual too. We have a huge display of memorabilia
and films. Was it last year? We even brought in Frank Sauce.
Oh yeah,
one of the oldest men in former Major League Baseball players. Happened to be the guy that Eddie Goodell pinch hit for, and we brought him in by Zoom from Amarillo. But when these guys are all up in their late 90s, they still participate with us, and I've got a few up my sleeve this year.
Do you? That's great. I can't talk enough about how fun it is.
So, folks, you need to check those things out. We'll post that on the show notes for you. Let's talk about that series in 44. What was unusual about it?
Let's do a little backstory about it. 1944. The United States and the world had just come out of the Depression in the late 30s. But war had been going on in Europe for 6 years by the time 1944. The United States had joined the war effort in late 41, really 42 and 43. So it really wasn't the best of time as we started play on opening day in 1944. There was doubt. Would the Allies, the United States-led Allies, would they win? They hadn't even really gone into Europe yet. D-Day would be June 6th. There was a few excursions down around Italy, but for 2 years it had been a rocky fight in Africa and trying to get a foothold to go into Europe, and there was doubts. So it wasn't necessarily the best of times. People had gone through the Depression and the poverty, the Hoovervilles, the rationing of everything, and they were back doing rationing, gasoline, tires, groceries, all this stuff. So that is how we entered the season. And it was also interesting, too, the impact in baseball. And now, a backstory again. In World War I, in 1918, they cut the season short so the players could go off to Europe with World War I. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt, immediately after Pearl Harbor came out in early January, he said, no, there will be baseball. I want baseball. It's going to take long, hard work to win this effort. But people need to relax. And, your audience today, you've got to remember, there were no iPhones, there was no iPads, computers, there wasn't television. All the things of entertainment we had in those days, you had radio. And it was always, radios were huge. They were bigger than TVs in those days, and everybody would sit around and watch the radio, which was a silly statement, but they all, and Roosevelt said, you will come home after working long hours and you will listen to baseball. It will relax us. And that energized major leagues to go to night baseball so that people could do it. A lot of the players by 1944 were off in the war effort. The 1943 world champion Yankees, who had beaten the Cardinals the year before in the World Series. The Cardinals had been in the World Series in 42 and 43. Their 8 starting players of their lineup were now in the service. Guys like DiMaggio, Bob Feller, Greenberg, all the big guys were in the service. Baseball was becoming minor leaguers, 4Fs, and the guy who was probably the biggest architect on the Brown side and across baseball was Bill DeWitt Sr., the father of Bill DeWitt Jr., the chairman of the Cardinals. And he put together this tremendous team where he would say, okay, you're working in the war factory. So if you had to work in a war factory, you couldn't really do it. Here's your days. But you're off on these days. Okay, you're in my lineup. Or you're having to work in Cleveland. We're on our way to Cleveland and New York, so you hop on a train and you'll pitch these days and go back to work. And then you got 4 Fs, and for the people who aren't familiar with that term, they have some physical issue that does not allow them to play.
Like a deferment.
A deferment. Mm-hmm. Or you had other types of guys who were coming on board that DeWitt went out and signed. They were out of baseball for the last several years. You think you could come back and give us one more year or that? So there were a lot of guys that came back. Now, the Cardinals, the only real major player they lost, because Branch Rickey, he was such the wheeler dealer and things, was Enos Slaughter. But when you say the Cardinals were in the World Series in 42, 43, 44, and 46, people say, what happened in 45? Mm-hmm. Stan went in the Navy. He kept Stan out of the service until after the 44 World Series, and he went in. But the Cardinals were 3 times, this was their 3rd pennant. They were pretty much intact without Enos Slaughter. The Browns was this ragtag group of individuals from around the country put together, and they won. It was a interesting series, an interesting season, actually. The Browns actually, for the war effort, you could not have spring training more than 100 miles from your stadium, basically. Nobody's going to be down in Florida where you could be pictures of ball players in the sun and girls on the beach and all that because, look, Europe and the Pacific, you got guys getting killed.
Right.
We don't want that. So you had to stay close. Up in Boston, 100 miles in February and March, there's not a lot of good places to play, and they played at Tufts University up in New Hampshire. But the Browns went down to Cape Girardeau, and they played down there. And they had this huge arena with a big dirt infield that was for like horse shows and things if they couldn't be outside. And it really got them off to a tremendous start. The Cardinals went down to Cairo, Illinois, just across the river from Cape Girardeau. And that, I think, really had a lot to do. The Browns had put together a good team, but they got that really working out, and they came out on a big winning streak. And it was back and forth all season. Now, the Cardinals, they're going to win. They won 105 games.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they just played good baseball. They were a solid team. They had 3 MVPs. The 42 MVP and Mort Cooper. They got the 43 MVP and Stan Musial, and 44 MVP will be Marty Marion.
That's crazy.
Wow, that's great.
So
I never thought of
all
that.
of those little things. But in the end, the city became really turned on by the Browns possibly winning. And it was their high point. They almost won in 22, which is the 1922 is one of the greatest teams, led by George Sisler, who batted .420. He was in his range of 3 straight years, averaging .400. But he got hurt in mid-September, and they lost by 1 game to the New York Yankees at the end because the Browns and the Yankees ended the season. So this was the redemption. This was going to be it. As I said, the Cardinals just ran away with the National League, winning big, 105 games. The Browns struggled, came down to the last couple weeks. It looked like there would be, and actually we got the letters from the commissioner and everything about it. If it's a 3-way tie between the Yankees, the Tigers, and the Browns, this is what will happen. At the end of the day, what happened was the Browns and the Yankees would close the season, and the Browns are going to sweep that series. But going into the series, Detroit had a 1-game lead, and they were playing the lowly Senators. And you think, oh, my God, the Browns are going to play the Yankees.
Yeah.
Tigers get to play the Senators.
Hopeless.
Yeah.
It's hopeless. It would just be a continuation of the Browns' bad luck, which seems to always not go the right way. But this year it did because Friday games were rained out. Saturday there were double headers. Browns sweep here. And Washington wins one of those games. And now it comes down to the last day. They're tied. Washington wins that morning. The Browns being further west, different time zone, are playing a little later. Yankees take a lead. Chet Labes, of all guys, he's one of these guys that came out of the war plants and was playing. He hits a 2-run homer. and then we'll hit another home run later on, and the Browns win. The Browns win, as they say, or Harry Carey would say in '64. The Browns win. The only time it's ever said, but there you have it. But it was a time, like I said, it brought brightness to a bleak society because of the war effort, men being killed, the rationing. And it then led into a really interesting series. All games are going to be played in Sportsman's Park.
Right.
Because there's no travel. There's no off days. They will be played in consecutive. Tickets range from $7.50 for a box seat to $1.25 for a bleacher seat. Nothing like the hundreds of dollars that's paid. And they were all quick games, all around the two hour and 5 minutes.
Like a Bob Gibson game.
They were.
Fast.
They were very quick and to the point. And Musial, of all people, said, this is just so strange. We've been in 2 World Series, and the people are rooting against us. They're rooting for the Browns. They wanted to see the Browns win.
Go figure.
Yeah, it's just that team rallied. And actually, in 1944, the Browns outdrew the Cardinals for the season.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It was. Yeah. People really came together. But in the end, and we can talk about some of the specifics of the series, the Cardinals were the Cardinals, and there was a reason they won 3 pennants. And their depth, their strength, and pitching overcame the Browns.
Yeah. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis in Tune. We're talking to Ed Wheatley, and we're talking about the 1944 series. Well, what was that lineup like?
Let's have a look at the opening lineups for the 2 ball clubs. For the Browns, Gutteridge, second base. Krevich, center field. Labs, left field. Stevens, shortstop. Moore, right field. McQuinn, first base. Chrisman, third base. Hayworth, catching. And Galehouse, pitching. For the Cardinals, Hop, center field. Sanders, first base. Musial, right field. Walker Cooper, catching. Kurowski, third base. Litweiler, left field. Marion, shortstop. Bourbon, second base. And Mort Cooper, pitching.
I was really surprised, Ed, that the Browns had 2 pitchers that combined had 36 victories, 18-game winners.
Yeah.
If you think about the modern day, that was tremendous.
And a lot of it is, that was the game. You stayed in, you pitched, you were didn't think of all this going 5 innings and getting a bunch of relievers up until the mid-'70s, Mike Marshall era evolving. They went to complete games.
Right.
And
I like that. I have to admit, I miss that. Once in a while, we'll see a pitcher that'll go a couple extra innings.
They
go deep.
They had good pitchers. And as I said, Bill DeWitt Sr. won the general manager president of the year in 1944 because he put together, as I always say, the best 4 Fs. And he was an architect of this team. He would actually get it again, the first guy to get it in each league in 1961 when he put that Cincinnati Reds pennant-winning team. And then he actually built the Big Red Machine as well.
The DeWitt family going back that far, I just never imagined it. I never thought about it. They really do have quite a heritage in baseball.
Yes, they do. Long tradition.
I don't think a lot of people realize that.
And that's why I try to always emphasize what Bill Sr. did, and Jr. has carried on, and the third has carried on.
Yeah, they do have quite a tradition. Yeah. So it might be good they are with the Cardinals.
And then Bill Jr., the chairman, Bill DeWitt Sr. will eventually buy the Browns and own them, and Bill Jr. will actually be the bat boy, and it's Bill Jr.'s bat boy uniform that Eddie Goodell wears on his infamous step to the plate.
Oh.
And then one time we were talking with Bill in one of our luncheons, because that Cardinal front office always comes in, and it was like, so what happened to the uniform? We put it in the front room closet, and I wore it for Halloween, and my sister won it the next 2 Halloweens. And it's like one of the most priceless pieces of baseball memorabilia. It was a Halloween costume.
Love it.
And we need to find a permanent location for the St. Louis Browns memorabilia and for the organization.
We have so much, and we try. And, other cities have tried some of the relocated, and it's just you have to have a partnership because of that. But
the Cardinals,
they have that. We have a lot, and they do well in the Cardinal Hall of Fame.
Right.
They've got a big exhibit on the Browns. We have several.
And more cooperation from the Cardinals than from the Baltimore Orioles.
Oh, there's no cooperation from the Orioles, not at all. And now Orioles got new ownership starting this year. Their owner died earlier in the spring. And we'll see what the future is. My view is, hey, we own the Browns, and that's what they actually told us when we went up there and talked to them. They don't even fly the 44 pennant. So you own it, and we'll carry the tradition. But
doesn't seem right.
One thing going back in 1944, and when you do research and you write books and you write films, it's like you find these moments that they're just too good to be true. 1944 was one of these. It was the 40th anniversary of the 1904 World's Fair.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And you know what movie came out in 1944? Meet Me in St. Louis.
Oh, yeah.
The world was singing Meet Me in St. Louis. But in St. Louis, they weren't singing about going to the fair. They were singing about going to Grand and Dodier.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was the big song of 1944.
What a coincidence.
You know what? That was popular. But the number one film of 1944 and the one that would win the Academy Award right after the first of the year for the 44 period was Going My Way with Bing Crosby as the priest.
Oh, yeah.
And if you watch that film, what is Bing Crosby wearing throughout that film? A Browns warm-up jacket or a Browns sweatshirt, a Browns hat. You can't write that. You can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't.
It's inevitable.
It is. So you talk about having the museum, and we've had displays. I display the jackets and things that with the big Bing Crosby. But think about the lowly Browns of the 30s. All of a sudden, you're making movies. Meet Me in St. Louis. You got another movie that's going to win the Academy Award. Hawking the Browns, and here they are in the World Series.
It's amazing.
Cool or amazing?
Yeah, it's strange.
It's both.
Yeah,
it's stranger than fiction.
That's true. That's
or
true.
you could use the term going around today. It's weird.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. Right. It's a good weird, but it's weird.
Yes. So those are the magic moments when you research and write books and films that all of a sudden is whoa.
Yeah. 4-2. And the Cardinals the Browns won that first game.
The Browns win the first game 2-1. And just putting in the attendance ranged from 33 to 35,000. That's what Sportsman's Park held. And the thing that's going to drive this series is strikeouts. There were 92 strikeouts in the 6-game series.
Wow.
That's
crazy.
Yeah, which set a record. It's only been beaten once, and that was in a 7-game series. But both teams' pitchers were pitching great. As you said, the Browns won the first game 2-1. Denny Galehouse beat Mort Cooper. Mort Cooper only gave up 2 hits, but one of them was a 2-run home run by first baseman George McQuinn.
Oh, my gosh.
And, again, a lot of strikeouts in that game and what have you. But Game 2 is the pivotal point. It is the big kahuna because
it was a close game, too.
The Browns were actually winning, and what happened was there was a misplay. Max Lanier, the Cardinal pitcher, came up with men on base, and he bunted. And Nels Potter came charging in, grabbed the ball. Chrisman, the third base, charged in, and it may have jolted him a little bit, but Nels Potter throws the ball over McGuinn's head into the right field corner.
Oh, God.
And instead of being an out and we're out of the inning, the Browns still winning, it allowed the Cardinals to come back, and they won it in 11 innings. And the Browns should have won the game. It's an error that should never have happened, but that's baseball.
They committed 4 errors that game. It was crazy.
The Browns had 4 errors. They struck out 13 times. The Cardinals struck out 7 times. If they would have won, they would have been up 2-0.
That would have been.
And because then they're going to win Game 3. The Browns win Game 3, and it would have made them up 3-0. And that's a pretty steep climb. It just hadn't been done in baseball.
Right.
And so they racked up another nice win, 6-2, showed their dominance. Again, the Browns had 2 more errors and struck out 5 times, and the Cardinals struck out 10 times. Now, as we speak about all these strikeouts, this was one of the first times they opened up the center field bleachers at Sportsman's Park. They used to have shrubbery and greenery. They took that out to fill it, and in those days, men just basically wore white shirts.
Right.
And it was an October day, and a lot of the players complained they couldn't see the ball coming out of those white shirts in the center field bleachers. So
we're going to find out more about this particular series. It's the Streetcar Series. It's the one in 1944 between the St. Louis Browns and the St. Louis Cardinals. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston. We'll be right back to talk about it. The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. This is Arnold Stricker of St. Louis In Tune on behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page. On behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation, this has been Arnold Stricker of St. Louis In Tune.
Now the teams are taking the field, and the umpire yells, "Play ball!" The 1944 World Series is on.
There we are, folks. We're playing ball with Ed Wheatley here in studio. Mark and I are just chasing all these balls that Ed's just hitting out into the field. And we were going through each of the games a little bit, and the Cardinals were, up 2-1 at this point?
No, the Browns were up 2 games to 1.
Browns were up 2 games to 1.
And as you go in the third game, but just a little set the flavor of outside the stadium. Today's election day. We're in a presidential election year. One of the guys who always kept showing up at the ball game was a guy named Harry S. Truman, the Missouri senator who was running for vice president, and he would win with Franklin Roosevelt, and a few months later would be president of the United States. Yeah. And we got this classic picture of Harry and the two managers, Luke Sewell of the Browns and Billy Southworth of the Cardinals.
Wow.
But there's an interesting story to it. And a lot of it goes back to 1920 when Robeson Field is where the Cardinals played at Natural Bridge in Vanderveer, which is 5 blocks northeast of Sportsman's Park. They played that close together.
Yeah.
But their stadium was the last wooden grandstand in the major leagues, and men smoked cigars and threw them down, and fires started, and it kept catching fire, and they got rid of it.
It's a lot of cigars.
And Ricky pulled a fast one with the Browns owner, telling him, "Hey, you're a bad businessman. Your stadium is sitting here empty because you're on the road half the time. It's not being used. How about we use it? I'll give you this much money over a contract." Well, he didn't divide it by 30. It's really not that much, and that's where the Cardinals saved money because they weren't really maintaining and all this cost of a stadium, and that's where they invested into the minor leagues and created the minor leagues. There was no minor leagues until Ricky created them.
Really?
That's correct. It was all free agents.
Did not know that.
But Ricky believed he could get talent.
It's a good
had
idea.
An idea, signed him to contracts. He didn't want to do these free agent dealings with New York, Boston, Philadelphia, where all the money was. He developed them, signed them, and it leads to the World Series of 26, 28, 30, 31, 34, 42, 43, 44, 46.
That's why you need to listen to this show.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff.
But,
go ahead.
So anyway, the Cardinals are on the road. The Browns play in Sportsman's Park. Browns on the road. Cardinals play, right? So the managers got the same idea. And they lived in the Lindell Towers over on Lindell. So when we're on the road, you have the apartment.
Yeah.
And when I'm at home. I have the apartment.
Hilarious.
So and they shared it. Oh, wait a minute. You're both here. So who gets that was the raging news across the newspapers and everything. Who's going to get the apartment? Because both of their families were coming in.
That's great.
Luke Sewell eventually gets the apartment, and somebody finally in the Lindell Tower says, "Here, Billy, you can use mine." But that was just. It's just one of those little neat anecdotes that you don't even think about.
No, never knew.
They both share the apartment all year because they're never there. But when they're both there, who gets it?
Yeah,
Ed, that's the thing that humanizes and really makes this history come alive.
It does. It really does. And it brings pulling in the things about the two movies, the things about the two managers, all these neat little things. And as it was Sam, like I said, you needed that because. There was the distractions, as you just said, of the war and the effort. Boys going off, but people at home rationing. They could only get so much meat or salt or tires. Tickets were not to be sold beyond 100 miles from Sportsman's Park to limit travel. That's why they compressed the games to be contiguous so that there wouldn't be wasting time, travel, just get to it and play. So there was all these little neat anecdotes, and it all happened here in St. Louis.
My mom would often talk about not this particular series, but she would go to games and stand outside and look through the fence.
Oh, yeah.
She'd take the streetcar up and look through the fence. Couldn't afford to go to the game, but she would do that to
stand
watch
outside.
The game.
She could, yeah.
Wow.
Was the older? Sometimes people say, then once you're looking through a knothole, because in the old days they had a wood fence. True, it had happened, but when the knothole was the children's pass, and the Brownie Brigade was for the Browns, and the Brownie Brigade were more Brownies were more progressive because they had a boys' brigade and a girls' brigade, and they gave them to the girls. But it was like you said, the Cardinals are up at the end of Game 3. The Browns are up at the end of Game 3, 2-1 over the Cardinals. Then comes Game 4, and this is where Cardinals turn it up. Their depth, their experience, handling the pressure. You've already been into 2 World Series. Your team is pretty much intact as opposed to the Browns, which is just this grouping of men coming here, there, who's playing today. And Stan Musial leads the charge in Game 4. He hit a home run to put the Cardinals ahead, and they never fall back.
Wow.
But it was Musial's only home run.
I was going to say, there wasn't a lot of, looking at your sheet here, there wasn't a lot of home runs in that series.
And no stolen bases.
No stolen bases.
Oh, is that right? I never got that far. Really.
What a different game.
It was a totally different game. But it wasn't one like today where they sit back and wait for the home run. You hit, you get on base and somebody's going to put a gapper and you're going to run. But it does astonish you that there was no stolen bases.
Because Gas House Gang was... during this time?
The Gas House Gang was during the 30s. Dizzy Dean and the Gas House Gangs when they were there in 30, 31, and 34. The nickname of this team, really, especially in 42 and 43, was called the Swifties. That was Bob Bragg coined that, the St. Louis Swifties.
St. Louis Swifties.
But they weren't very swift in the World Series. But then again, if they're going to win and you just sit back, they just sat back and pulled it off. And a lot of it was, just their pitchers, as we said. Denny Galehouse beat Mark Cooper in Game 1. Galehouse gave up 6 hits, but only 1 run. Cooper only gave up 2 hits, but it was a 2-run homer to McGuinn that did him in. But he came back in the games, and when in Game 5, he will shut out the Browns. So there's a rematch of Galehouse and Cooper, and it's just one of those things that keeps going their way. We talked about the errors. The Browns would get another error in Game 4, strike out 4 times. The Cardinals would strike out 6 times. And then in Game 5, when Mark Cooper comes out there was just an error, and Galehouse struck out 6 Cardinals. Cooper struck out 12 Browns. So when you ask why these games go so fast, there wasn't a lot of action on the bases.
Yeah.
And it was exciting, but by Game 5, people saw the handwriting on the wall.
Yeah, I would think so.
There wasn't going to be a Cinderella. The clock is going to strike 12 on the Browns. And everybody wanted the Browns. They were cheering. Everybody's getting off. You look at those pictures of Grand Avenue outside, the streetcars all lined up for the series. It was fantastic. And then here comes Game 6, the last game. And the Cardinals are going to win 3-1. The Browns took a quick lead.
I can see where that second game really was pivotal.
It was. It just changed. It just changed. The air came out. Oh, man.
Yeah.
We could have won. And then when you win the third game, it's like, we should be up 3-0.
Yep.
And it really did.
That's a real turning point.
And it was such an easy play.
Yeah, that's what
easy play.
Game of inches, is that what they say?
It is.
And that
it just threw it into the right field corner. And actually then the right fielder threw it back, and there was another error on that same play. It just let the Cardinals right back, and the Cardinals believed, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah.
But it was, as I said, the pinnacle of baseball in St. Louis. How many teams? There's not that many that have two teams anymore in the city, but even the 100 and some odd years that they did when Boston and Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, they're really, except for New York and with the Giants and the Yankees, or the Yankees and the Dodgers, there really weren't that many instances outside.
Then you have teams like the Angels that can't figure out what their identity actually is, whether it's Anaheim, Los Angeles, California. So I have a question for you, and I have read, and I'm not sure because you never know what you're reading, that there were no insignias on the hats, or at least on the Browns hats.
On the Browns hat, there was not. It was a white, we called it a painter hat. It was like white and just had brown stripes going, like you would say, from 12 to 6 and then 3 to 9. But the Cardinals did have the rest of you.
Okay, all right. Was there a reason for that, or was it cost, or that's just how they did it?
It wasn't really money or anything. It was just trying to create new images. It's not like today where you change uniforms or get more uniforms, change hats for money. Because people weren't out buying all that in those days. They didn't have the money to afford it. It was just that brown. It was a white cap, brown bill with that brown piping stripes on the hat. But that's a good point. Think about when was the last time a team did not have an insignia on their hat. And that may have been the last one now that I think about it.
And wool uniforms.
Well, wool flannels.
Wow.
You know what they are? They were basically like a diaper.
Oh,
the old cotton, the wool, the diapers.
Right.
They were made to absorb something else, but the uniforms were made to absorb sweat. You know how heavy that was? I remember playing in those flannel uniforms when I was younger, and even today still playing some of the uniforms. Like Sunday was a heat bath and how much that uniform weighed. And we don't have that flannel just sucking it up.
And you're still playing ball, aren't you?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
It's a men's league or something?
Senior baseball league across the country, and play about 100 games. Go play in the International World Series down in Florida, and then playing in the major league stadiums and that. Teams from the United States, Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, the Dominican. I don't know if we'll have anything from Venezuela with what's going on over there today. But no, it's fun. And, we play Phoenix. We play.
Where do you all play?
We play in Fort Myers, and we play in the Red Sox, the Twins, and the old.
This is great.
Terry Park was in Fort Myers. It was created by Connie Mack. It was the first spring training stadium. And when you walk up into that stadium, which they've kept up, and you're thinking, you walk up to the box, Ruth stood there, Gehrig stood there, Ty Cobb stood there. And it was used all the way up through the Kansas City Royals would use it at times.
Yeah.
And the great Clemente, it was a Pirates stadium there for a while, but it's just so much history. But when you're playing,
that's pretty cool. I know I went to the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, and they've got a little star on the center of the stage, and you stand there and you go, the same thing.
Right.
The people that have stood at this plate, at this spot, it's amazing. It just chills through you.
Yeah, like George Sisler, the great Brown. His grandsons are friends of mine, and I was down there playing, and I was on first base one time, and I got the idea. I'm going to put a big GS right next to that base, and after the game, went out there and took a picture of it and said, hey, here's where your grandfather stood.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
Speaking of Connie Mack, he was at the series, wasn't he?
Yes, Connie Mack was at the series. And a lot of people, personalities, one of the infamous things I got an autograph of on a series scorecard was Joey Brown, remember? Yeah, the famous comedian actor.
Yeah.
But a lot of movie stars were there. And wait a minute, there's not supposed to be any travel, but all these big shots are there.
Right, sure. I figure that.
And there were a lot of politicians because it was 1944, October. You're less than 30 days away from the election, and they were campaigning. But it was, like I said, it was a special time for St. Louis, and we shouldn't forget about that.
No.
And actually, even though the Browns lost, they were picked and favored to win the next year in 1945 going into it, but they fell apart, and there were a lot of issues in the clubhouse with the team because they brought up Pete Gray, the one-armed outfielder.
Oh, yeah.
Pete Gray had been the MVP in the Sally Leagues. And again, were they diluted a little too because of the men in the service? But he deserved a shot at it. And he came up, and like I said, he was good down there. But I'm here to tell you, the difference between minor league pitching and major league pitching is miles and miles apart. Mm-hmm. And they soon figured out how to pitch to him. And he had that unique glove, how he would catch the ball, throw the ball up, drop the glove, catch the ball, throw it in. And it was successful. But there was some animosity in the clubhouse. Certain players, not to get into names, felt that he was cheating the team because they were putting him out there. Is it a stunt? We're better. We won. And they actually had to trade a couple of the players. There was such animosity built up. And for that, guys like Pete Gray can get a bad rep. And did he belong? He proved he could be there. Jim Abbott later on will come forth. And I told everybody, servicemen getting wounded and coming back handicapped from the war, he became an inspiration. And if one of my films for PBS, I have a gentleman who had leg damage issues, and his father would bring him to Browns games and say, look at that guy there. He made it to the major leagues with just one arm. You can do a lot with your life. Don't sit and act, oh, I'm handicapped.
Wow.
Get over it. Watch this guy.
Yeah.
And that's the Pete Gray that I like to highlight. He did have his chip on his shoulder because he lost his arm when he was 12 in an accident, truck accident. But we got to remember him as this inspiration to soldiers.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And there was recently, wasn't there another major leaguer who one arm? He was a pitcher? Or am I just dreaming?
Jim Abbott was really the last one that I recall. There's been people who had injuries. Then there's the guy who switches between left and right. And But it was just, he played well, but again, he could not adjust. When you only got one arm and you got to adjust the change of the pitch, they figured out how to jam him and change and it just was his downfall.
We talk a lot about how money dictates things. We talked a little bit about uniforms and the sales of things. And back then, and I really appreciate your covering this, that what was the time like? We were in war. We had just come out of the Depression. Times were tough. And I'm looking at how much tickets were. $7.50 for a box seat, $1.25 for a bleacher seat, and then the players' share, if you won, the Cardinals, they received roughly $4,600. The Browns got $2,400. And you think about that in today's time. The times are so different, advertising and everything else. But one of the key things that I think you're bringing out, Ed, is just how that really brought the community together, that baseball was almost in its purest form. Here we have two teams, from the same city, one who maybe shouldn't be here, one who definitely should be here, and they both engaged and played, and everybody had a great time.
I think that goes back to Franklin Roosevelt in January of 1942, that green light letter I spoke of earlier, where he said, we will, basically, to use your words, we will rally around baseball. That's how we'll have this entertainment and relax at night. The family sits together in that front room. It's not like that today everybody's dispersed throughout the house, but they're all together listening to that baseball game, staring at a radio. But it held the people together. It gave them something special in life. And the thing of it was, here in St. Louis, if you draw where was baseball, you start with St. Louis, head up north to Chicago, over to Detroit, then over to Boston, and from Boston down to Washington, D.C., then back along the Ohio River to St. Louis. That triangle was where all baseball was.
Right.
And here in St. Louis, we had KMOX radio with one of the strongest signals. It went from coast to coast, east, west, and then north and south down from the Gulf to Canada. And so during this time of the Depression, during this time of the World War II, they enjoyed Cardinal baseball and became Cardinal and Browns followers because of KMOX radio. Because I even remember back when I came out with the Browns book, I got a crazy idea, and I sent a copy to Bill Clinton, and because I knew his mom was a big baseball fan. And I said, did you ever listen to a Browns game, the likes of Dizzy Dean announcing or whatever, your mom, and he wrote me back a really nice letter and thanked me for the book. But it was a letter talking about memories of baseball in St. Louis because the broadcast.
Right. No kidding. Yeah. And you've got something else up your sleeve that you're working on.
Oh,
and you have short sleeves on, too.
What's going on with it? A film producer. We haven't even touched on that.
I got 2 other books coming out, too. I'm working on right
2 other
busy
books.
Fella here.
A movie?
Yeah, I'm working on a movie right now,
And can you fill us in just a little bit and tease people about it?
St. Louis is very special, and I wrote about that in my book, Moments and Memories from America's Best Sports Town, because there's just so much that we have done in the world of sports. Our world of sports history goes back to 1860. The first baseball game under today's rules that were created by Alexander Cartwright, not our general up in Cooperstown, Abner Doubleday. And I used to tell Shannon, you can't say old Abner done it again because he didn't ever did it. It was Alexander Cartwright created the game in Hoboken, New Jersey, not Cooperstown.
I miss Shannon a lot.
And,
I really do.
So the first games were played in Fairgrounds Park in July 1860 under those rules. So our history of that sport goes back that long. That's before the Civil War starts. That's before Lincoln's president. And you think about these cities like Atlanta, they didn't really start popping up until the 70s. Sports a big time being don't get to California until the 50s. And Dallas and Houston, those are just, they don't really evolve until the 70s and the big stuff. But St. Louis has this tremendous history of sports. We had 4 Major League Baseball teams, 4 NFL teams, 2 NHL, 2 NBA. We had the first female owner of a Major League Baseball team. The first female owner of an NFL team brought her team to town and put a title on her resume, and her name was not Georgia. And now we got the first female owner of MLS soccer team. And there's 5 of that top trophies or cups in sports have St. Louis roots to them. And that's what I started writing this. I mean, in the first for African Americans, besides the Browns putting the 3rd and 4th African American on the field and being the first team in Major League Baseball to have 2 blacks on their team, we had the great Arthur Ashe playing in Richmond, Virginia. But he couldn't play against whites. He couldn't play indoors in the winter. Where did he come to play? The hub of North American tennis was here in St. Louis at the Armory. So Arthur Ashe, and we weren't the most open and affirming city from what I remember in the 60s, but Arthur Ashe came here because that's the place to play tennis. And Jackie Joyner across the river. And there's just on things for African American, things for women that I spoke of. We had the Golden Girls of tennis alongside Jimmy Connors and Butch Buchholz and that whole crew, but all these firsts. And I really talk about when St. Louis was founded back in the 1700s. We were a river city. Then we were the gateway to the west. We were the auto city next to Detroit. We were only second to Detroit in the making of automobiles with the 5 factory plants here in St. Louis. And then we were a beer town, of course, with all the beer strips. And we supported the air with all the jets from McDonald, and we ruled the space with the capsules, Mercury, Gemini, and all those that came from McDonald. But through it all, we were a sports town. That's St. Louis's brand, is the best sports town, because we're in all these first within the stories that I spoke briefly. A lot of them in the book. We were in the little things like corkball was created here and taken all over the.
No, cut it out.
Yes,
really?
It was. Yes, it was.
Had no idea.
Yeah, so and it was taken across the country by servicemen from St. Louis. We had Yogi Berra teaching the Yankees how to play corkball at Yankee Stadium or out on flight decks. In the Pacific, they would build the cages. You remember you used to have cages behind all the taverns?
Taverns, right.
For corkball?
Right.
They built cages on the flight decks so when they weren't taking the jets off, they play corkball.
I had no idea.
Yeah. The Corey League, which was to teach kids how to play baseball, to keep them out of trouble, it was created here in St. Louis in 1934 by George Corey, and he took it across the country and all the states, so still headquartered here. So all these things, all these special moments that I could go on for hours, but that's our brand. Now, you look at fast forward. How did St. Louis go through all those times from the gateway to the West? Sports held them together, just as we spoke on this call earlier about getting us through the war with baseball. And it was all focused here in St. Louis, through the Cardinals and all their 4 appearances in the World Series and the Browns. And sports is that important. And today, I think it's more important than anything because St. Louis was at one time the 4th largest city in America. Today, we rank as a municipality of all the regions joined is 21st. That's a big drop. We've lost businesses through mergers, and we've lost politicians created. Did they chase this company out or this football team out? There's been issues like that. And we've had a divide. We're divided racially. We're divided politically. We're divided city, county. We're divided Missouri, Illinois. The film is really, right now, it may be the unifier or something like that, how sports unifies. What would downtown St. Louis be if there wasn't sports downtown? Right now, the buildings that, having worked down there for 36 years, it's all empty to a large extent. People don't go there, but they go for the baseball. Bill DeWitt in our film talks about it is the toll booth downtown with the Cardinals because that's what brings in all this money to St. Louis. And the Blues do, and the Rams did, the Battlehawks. It is. And so this film is really talking about how sports has been so entwined in our culture. It brings people together. Jackie Joyner said, the river doesn't separate us over sports. We come together. So Jackie Joyner, as I spoke, is in it. Bob Costas is in it. Bill DeWitt. We got all the big names through St. Louis sports and across the country contributing to this to tell this story that this is what we have. We have something to rally around. Don't get down. And I remember someone we had in our Wrestling at the Chase film set this tone during the. We
could do a whole show on that.
We can. During the 60s, there was the different marches and the different protests at several banks and everything. And this was an Afro-American lady, and we found her in the crowd. We knew who she was and went and got her all these decades later. And tell us your thoughts, because we were interviewing people who we knew were in the film, clips ringside and that. And we said, what was it like in this? And everybody, you look at the crowd, it's blacks and whites all sitting, rooting. And she goes, I don't care what's going on outside right now, because during this time, we're wrestling fans. They might be walking, but we're wrestling fans in here, side by side. And that is the beauty of sports. Think about it when you go to Busch Stadium or a hockey game. The ethnicities, there aren't any. No. You're a fan of the Blues. You're a fan of the Cardinals or the Battlehawks. That's how we should rally our city together to just – we have something we can all agree on.
Yep.
And it's our teams.
Take the agreement out of the sports venue and put it onto
elsewhere.
The social.
Build on it. Build on it. Yes. Yeah. That's our brand. Build on it.
It is.
No city has a history like ours.
Ed, that's so true. It is true. What a foundation it is.
That'd be something to look forward to. Seeing that it's something that's going to unify the unifier. You know how
it does. It brings us all together. So true.
Yeah,
I know.
We really appreciate you coming in and talking to us about the 44 series and
thank you very much.
Upcoming books and the movie and
the big Brown and Grizzly thing at August.
Browns game on August 15th and the big luncheon at the MAC at September 24th. You can go to the STLBrowns.com and you can get the information and buy your tickets and buy the book.
Right.
You can get everything you want.
Yeah.
We'll put the links in the show notes, folks. You can get that STLintune.com, STLintune.com. After I post that, we're always thankful that you listen in. That's pretty much all for this hour.
It's a fast hour.
If you've enjoyed this episode, you can listen to additional shows at STLintune.com. Consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue to grow. Thanks to our guest, Ed Wheatley, to Bob Berthasell for our theme music, and co-host Mark Langston. And we thank you for being a part of our community of curious minds. St. Louis in Tune is a production of Motif Media Group and the U.S. Radio Network.